I'm not doing this again. Not doing it. I'll explain to you why in this video. So I'll explain to you guys why. More than likely, I will probably never build another 40 horsepower engine again. And it's basically a cost benefit thing. The reason I built this engine I've got right here is because I had a lot of the parts already, and a lot of this stuff has changed over the last few years. The parts for the 40 horse, the cylinders and pistons have gone up substantially, and the crankshaft grinding, to grind a crankshaft, it almost costs, I mean, I can buy a cast crank for just a few dollars more than I can to regrind the old 40 horse crank. Now, the old 40 horse cranks were weak anyway, and you can only develop so much power with one, with the size of the engine being 1385 or 1384, depending on how you want to calculate it. Because I guess they're not quite 83s or 82.97 or something, I don't know, whatever. I go at 1385, that's what we did for years. Even if I just wanted to look like one of these, I will do it a different way. And I'll explain that to you guys again in this video. So if you look at what it costs for the 83 big bore kit, they're about $100 more than your regular pistons and cylinders, your 85.5 pistons and cylinders. And it's just a few dollars more to buy a cast 69. And those will actually fit in this case if you have the case machine. So having the stock case machined and opened up like so for a 85.5 is right around $100. Or if you want to go even bigger and you have 8mm studs, or you don't have case savers and you can put 8mm studs in it, you're going to case saver the case, you can even go bigger. Now, I wouldn't go bigger if you have 10mm studs and case savers. Stay with the 69, you'll be good. So basically, for, I'm guessing, $100-ish of the same price that I could build a big bore 40, I could build a stronger 69 crank engine. And it just doesn't make sense anymore to put together another 40 horse. So again, you know, guys who want to go all original, that's fine. You want to do that, that's up to you. But, you know, I mean, even if you just had the same 40 horse heads machine, you could actually put those on and nobody's going to know except you. And especially when you're driving it, you're definitely going to know. You're going to have a little more torque and horsepower from that 1600. Now, of course, having those stock 40 horse heads machine is going to be a little bit pricey. I mean, it's not that much really, about $100 or something like that, depending on where you go. Crankshaft has a really good price on doing head work. So if you have heads that you want to save, let's say you want to do that to your 40 horse heads, you could take them down there and have them do that. The only issue that you would run into, and for me it's not an issue, I'm going to just widen the intake manifold myself, is the intake manifold's going to be a little too narrow. So you're going to run into that problem. And you know, again, it's a fixable thing. Personally, I'm going to put a single port on it if I want it to look like a 40 horse, and I'll get more horsepower for doing that. A 16 single, like the one in this car, a 16 signal with a cam, if you put a, you know, this one has about 268 duration and about 400 lift. If you put a cam similar to that in there and gave it about 8 1/4 to 1 compression, real easy to do while you got it apart, that engine is going to move. I mean, that thing will get up and go. And to get a 40 horse to do that, it's probably not going to happen, because you got those really small intake ports. And even if you know, it's going to be, you can get a little bit of power of a 40 horse, but you're going to spend a ton more money just to get it to do it. So to me, it's at the point where, you know, the parts to save one and make it all original are kind of going away. All right, and you know, a lot of guys are gonna not like this video because of that, but let's just be honest, the guys. 85.5 pistons are way cheaper than 83s, and you look at how much it costs to get a crankshaft reground now. You guys won't believe it. So you can buy a brand new cast crank, because you're not going to put much horsepower into it. A cast counterweighted crank. Now, I've had a lot of people go, hey, you know, do I really need a counterweighted crank? I'm only just driving around town. Listen, I can tell you, I can get in a car and I can tell right away. I mean, with driving it up the street and back, I can tell you whether it's got a counterweighted crank. Somebody goes, oh yeah, I can get my assembly balanced and all that, and you won't be able to tell. No, you can tell. Because what happens is the harmonics are changed. Now, personally, I'm not a cast crank guy, but if I was building maybe a 40 horse, I might consider it. I would prefer buying the forged crankshaft, 4140 minimum. 4340 is my favorite one, of course. It's a little more money, but I think it's worth it personally. So with the counterweighted crankshaft, this is a stock crank. When the engine fires here, okay, there's a counterweight on the opposite side. And so the stress from the fire is soaked up right next to here where the counterweight is. That's the reason that Porsche puts them on their engines. It's the reason that most other engines had counterweights. This was a cheap alternative for VW to do. And what happens with this is when this fires, it has to go through the whole crankshaft to the flywheel to be able to dissipate that amount, and it creates a harmonic situation where you have some vibration in here, and you can actually feel that in the car. Once you go counterweighted, it's kind of like the old saying, once you go that direction, you'll never go back. You ever heard that one? Yeah, you're not going to want a non-counterweighted engine once you drive one with the counterweights. I just have experience with that over the years. Years ago, it was very cheap to build a non-counterweighted engine. The parts were really cheap, and that's all changed now, guys. It's actually cheaper in a lot of ways to go counterweighted. So it just doesn't make sense to do it without counterweights. I remember back years ago, the first time I drove a counterweighted engine, my cousin built a 1776 with a counterweighted crankshaft, and man, it just spun so nice. The power, you could just feel, it just felt so direct compared to, like, he had a 1750 is what it was actually. It was a 90, not a 90.5, but a 90. Okay, and I had an 1835 with a non-counterweighted crank, and his just felt so much better than mine. And it was basically the counterweights that I was feeling, and you know, I just liked them ever since then. And now that they've become actually cheaper to do, or very, very similar in cost, it just doesn't make sense. So anyway, building the powered up 40 horse, the reason I built that one is because I had all the parts, the used crankshaft. Now you guys, again, if I ran into a bunch of used parts and stuff like that, then I might do it. But if I have to buy new machine parts, it just doesn't make any financial sense. The engine that was in this bucket truck originally was probably a running engine at some point, and it sat outside and got filled with water, and the inside of the engine was very, very goopy, but the crankshaft was in great shape, and the rods, so I used those. I used the pistons that I had laying around from the big bore 40 that I did years ago that was actually in the blue car, and I took those parts and salvaged them. They were in great shape still, and I just put some new rings, new bearings, cleaned it up. And personally, that's the only way I probably will ever put together another 40. So if you're like me and you don't really care what's inside the engine to be original, and you just, even if you just want it to look original, you could put all the tin that's on this on there. You would run into a little bit of an issue with the width, okay? Now, there's a lot of ways to play around with that stuff too. So if I really wanted it to be looking like this, I could do stuff to narrow the engine down, you know, and I would be willing to probably do that if I wanted it to look like this. I could narrow you could deck things down, you could step cut the heads and get more combustion chamber in them. If you want it to look exactly like this, there's a way to do it. You might have to deck the cylinders, you know, bring them down a few thousandths or whatever, and then put more fire in the head. You could get that thing to run way, 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 way better than an old 40 and look exactly like one. So I don't know, I'm weighing it out. I'm just looking at it for myself. If you guys want to just check it out for yourselves, you know, look at how much it costs for a cast crank, cast counterweighted crank. You're going to have to find either some used or good 1600 rods, which are pretty much everywhere. You could probably find a good set of used ones, put them on a scale, okay? You know, if you want to check them with a bore scope and the whole 9 yards, go for it. You might just find ones with low miles on them. I find that they're pretty easy to find, and I would put all the rods on a scale and check them out, and that's what personally I would do with my old 40 horse at this point. If I'm going to build one that's new, all right. If I have a bunch of used parts, then possibly I would put a big bore kit on one if I had a good crankshaft, you know, and all I had to buy was the cylinders. I might consider doing that, but for the most part, I think it makes no financial sense to build another 40 horse. This will probably be, I'm going to say this is probably going to be the last engine 40 horse that I ever built. And I've said that before. I said the last time, oh, this is the last one I built. But then I started gathering all the parts together. I'm like, you know, I've got enough parts to build a good 40, and I can do a big bore, and I can just throw one of those cool cams in it, and it'll be kind of a neat thing to put together. But personally, at this point, I'd say these things are pretty much over for me. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you guys. Look at those options. Look at what it costs to have a case opened up for 1600. It really doesn't cost much to do, and you know, take those things in consideration before you go and spend a ton of money on all new 40 horse parts. You might want to consider just putting the 69 in there, 69 counterweighted, and just going to a nice smoother engine that's going to give you a lot more torque, a lot more horsepower. It's going to go down the road really nice, you know, and you could put a lot of your 40 horse parts on it. You might have to do a little bit, like if you're going to run this 10 and you're going to run single port heads, which would probably make more sense. You could put the single port 10 on here, okay? And these here have notches in them, so you could still run the 40 horse back 10, or yeah, the back 10 and the one behind here, and just run your single port 1600 stuff here, and you could put your stale air on it if you wanted to, and you could make that probably work. With a 1600, it would probably work fine. With the 1800, it was just too much for that exhaust, because those exhaust systems are pretty small. And in the bucket truck, of course, with all the weight. Maybe in a stock car you could do it. Weigh out the options, guys, before you go and blow your wad on a bunch of 40 horse parts. Check out turning it into a 1600. You won't, after you're done and you drive it, you won't be disappointed. You'll be like, wow, this is way more power. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe. That's my opinion, and that's what I'm doing from now on.